host and your town manager, Derek Brindisi. So those of you who are joining us live this morning, a little background. We started this program about 2 months ago as another platform to try to connect to residents and to try to give them the opportunity to ask questions of town officials, of things that are current information that's happening in the community. So this morning, we have 3 town officials who are with us, and we're going to discuss the civil service question that's going to be on the May 17th ballot. So with us this morning, we have Chief Dana Flynn. We have Lieutenant Mark Higgins, who is the president of the Superiors Union, and then Officer Kyle Kreitzer, who is the president of the Patrolman Union. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
So just so folks are aware, I just want to give a little bit of background on this ballot question. So the Select Board on April 11th, I believe the date was, voted to place a ballot question. I'm going to read the question so folks are aware. The question will read, and this is question 1 on the May 17th ballot, shall this town revoke its 1917 acceptance of the Civil Service Law, Chapter 31 of the Massachusetts General Laws for the Police Department? And then like any other ballot question, we have to define what a yes vote would mean and what a no vote would mean. So for the folks at home watching this, a yes vote would allow the town to establish its own hiring, promotional, and disciplinary appeals processes for the police department without being subject to the Civil Service Law. A no vote would make no change to the process for hiring, promoting, and disciplinary appeals processes for the police department, and the town would continue to establish existing statewide criteria. So so that's the question. That's what the yes will mean. That's what the no will mean. And so, more background. In order to get out of civil service, Chief, correct? We have to get out of civil service the way we entered civil service. And the way we entered civil service was in 1917. It was a ballot question, which is why we're going back to the ballot in a few weeks. And in 1917, a ballot question was placed asking the voters the same. And 658 voters said yes, and 605 voters said no. So it's a majority vote. 658 votes yes prevailed. And so back in 1917, that's how the town and has ever been in civil service, correct?
Correct.
So let's talk a little bit about civil service, because all of us who've been working in local government certainly have an understanding of what civil service is and is not. But I'm sure many of our voters really don't understand what civil service is, Chief. Right. So can you kind of give us all like a
Sure.
Civil Service 101 and what it means?
Yeah, so in 1884, the Commonwealth established the civil service rules and laws to address concerns of patronage, nepotism, and disciplinary issues in government jobs. It was established in an effort to protect those employees and make the process of hiring and obtaining positions such as police officers more fair and equitable. Mm-hmm. Since then, as we know here, many laws and commissions have been established that address these issues, including Mass Commission Against Discrimination, mm-hmm. State Ethics Commission, and other similar laws that address these issues that were brought up in 1884.
Right. So think about that. So back in the late 1800s. There was probably some nepotism, certainly some cronyism that was taking place, and as a way to guard against that, the Civil Service Law was passed here in Massachusetts. But as you pointed out, over the course of the last 100 years, we now have the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination. That's a board, right? So if you have a discrimination complaint for any reason, you can go file an appeal with them. Locally, we have anti-nepotism laws that we use, anti-fraternization laws that we use. So none of the existing laws, as I see it, were in place back in the 1800s when civil service was created. So certainly back then there was a primary reason for civil service. And so for the folks at home, if you have a question, just type it into the chat box and we'll read your question, and we'll have one of the 3 gentlemen with us this morning answer those questions. So feel free to ask questions at any time during the course of the show.
Yeah, one thing we also have now is we have collective bargaining. So a lot of the union contracts between the patrolmen and superiors address those concerns as well.
Right,
So they're well
yeah.
covered.
And the collective bargaining agreements, again, so folks at home that may not understand, that's why we have our two union presidents here. The town administration with the chief and into the select board, we negotiate 3-year contracts with the unions, right? And so in those contracts, it spells out and guards against a lot of the things I think we've talked about. Does anyone want to reference collective bargaining and how those agreements have protected police officers over the years?
Regarding collective bargaining, it's always a back and forth, and we're always trying to work on getting a fair contract also for the town and for patrol. So we've always operated with a level of protection from civil service, but also with, state laws and, local policies. So I feel like we're protected, even without civil service, we'll still be protected under those other umbrella laws and rules.
Because as you point out, the town is and the union members are required to abide by the collective bargaining agreement. And in collective bargaining, we have the grievance process laid out. So if there was a grievance filed by the union, we would have to follow that process. And then, say we didn't have resolution regarding a grievance. There was a police officer who felt that they were discriminating against, for example. There's 2 processes currently that could take place, right, Chief?
Right. So we go through the normal process, step 1, step 2. There's no resolution. Right now they have the opportunity to either aggrieve or extend the grievance or process through the Civil Service Commission, or they have the option of an independent arbitrator. We found over the course of my career, vast majority go to the independent arbitrator.
So so right now the vast majority of grievance would go to the independent arbitrator. So the question is, if we came out of civil service, that's still the pathway that they would follow,
That's still
right?
the pathway.
Right, so that's not going to change. So if we came out of civil service, a grievant would go through the grievance process outlined in the collective bargaining agreement, which still will exist without civil service, right? That's not going to change. If they're not satisfied with the grievance process, they'll go through independent arbitrator, right, out of Boston, and that's not going to change, right, Lieutenant? Right, that's not going to change if we come out of civil service.
Correct, that will not change.
So, in that sense, a lot of the protections that we have today are going to continue. Is that a fair assessment?
Correct.
Yes, and I think that was it was an important part to ensure that it was the same as with civil service, that we were protected just as much if we came out as if we still stayed in.
Right, and that's really important. I think it's important for everybody. Do we have any questions as of yet?
As of yet,
No questions. So let's continue forward. So, again, we're talking about civil service. We're talking about, why a yes vote would give the police department some flexibility
Right.
in hiring, in particular recruiting and retaining police officers. Which, Chief, so I've been here a little over 3 years now, and
Right.
I think you've been in your seat for about almost 4 years, coming on this summer, I think.
Yes, 4 years.
And you and I, over that course of time, we've often talked about recruiting and then, more importantly, retaining our police force. And
Right.
can you share with the folks some of the struggles and the vacancies that you've
Sure.
you've dealt with over the course of your tenure?
Yeah, so the very first year I was on the job, we had projected by that September we were going to be short 24 officers. And we're still struggling through that. For whatever reason, several years ago, the police profession, we found those interested, number of people interested in being police officers steeply declined. I'm not going to get into the reasons for that, but it is what it is. So just for example, FY22, we ended up with a shortage of 11 officers. 23, we had 6 officers short. 24, we had a shortage of 8 officers. Right now, I do have 10 student officers in the police academy. 8 are scheduled to graduate in June, 2 more in September. However, even with that shortage, I'm still short 6 officers. Mm-hmm. I did have another resignation, a notification of resignation come to me day before yesterday, so that's 7. And right now, I also, in addition, I have 5 scheduled retirements by the end of this calendar year. So right now, the projection by next December, I will be short 11 officers. Currently, right now, the student officers that were hired in the academy now were off of our last civil service list, and which became available to me last July. So they their first instance of contact with the department to become a police officer started last July. We will not have out of that list. We exhausted all the potential residential applicants, and we will not have a new civil service list available to us till this July or maybe later, because they just had the exam in March, and it takes a period of time for the appeals processes and the list to be certified.
So let's just pause for a minute, just so people at home can consume this information. This show will be aired, in future dates as well, so people can watch a recording. So what you just said is that in order for you as the chief to bring on new police officers, you have to call for the civil service list, which means that we need residents in our community to take the exam in order to get on the list, and by getting on the list, then they can, at that point, start to go through the candidate process, the vetting process. And so just that process alone, what would be different if we were not in civil service?
So there's a couple of different avenues that other police agencies have opted for. Some have their own exams. Some just have an application process. Some hire third-party vendors that have a continuously running exam that they can call this for. Other chiefs I've spoken to, they said that they've been able to fill vacancies, and get the candidates through the academy process within 2 weeks. Our last civil service list that these 10 student officers were hired from only had 43 residents' names had taken the exam. When they were notified to sign the list of interest, we only had 21 of the 43 sign the list that they were still interested. Out of that number, only 12 returned the application packet, and we ended up with the 10 that we have today. All great candidates. We are not reducing our standards by any means. Trust me on that.
But that process started last summer.
Started last July.
So last July, and what are we in April now?
Yep.
So almost 9 months ago, you started the process to get 10 police officers on the force, projecting an additional 12 vacancies by the end of this year. So you're going to start this process all over again. And Lieutenant, you had mentioned at the select board meeting on Tuesday, because you're the training officer, correct?
Yes, I am.
The time it takes to start this process, get them through the academy, get them through the field officer training, and then get them on the road. Can you describe folks from the moment they take the civil service exam all the way from them getting on the road, like the length of time that takes?
So it's the length of time to start at the end is approximately just under 18 months. So almost a year and a half before when they come in for their first interviews, to meeting all the qualifications to start the police academy, whether it's the PT test, the psychological exam, the physical that they have to take. Then they start the police academy, which is 22 weeks. Upon their graduation of the police academy, they're still not patrolling the streets. They have to do 80 hours of our in-house training so that they're learning generally how to be a police officer. But then when they come to us, we have to teach them how to be a Plymouth police officer, how to do our policies and procedures, our town, how the layout of our town is, and how we operate as an organization. After those 80 hours of that portion of training, they're then put into a field training officer program that's through 3 different phases. And once they complete that 3 months from that point, then it's called cutting your wings, and they are on the road by themselves. Still learning at that point. And but yeah, it's approximately about a year and a half.
So from beginning to end, from the moment we call for the exam to getting them on the road so they're an officer who can work independently, it's 18 months.
Yeah, so if we have an officer that, say, retires in July, and we go to replace him, there's a good chance that that one replacement for him will not be starting until the following year in that fall.
Right,
Just how long
and
it
that's
takes.
right. That's what the chief had mentioned. He just got notice this past week that we have one person who said that they're leaving for whatever reason. So it's going to take us 18 months to fill that seat, to fill that cruiser.
Under the standards right now, yes.
That's unbelievable. So I'm going to ask. I have a few more questions, but I know we have someone who's called in. Can we hear that question?
They just sent the question in the chat. The question is, would the police department have the option to rejoin civil service if exiting civil service does not solve the department's issue of recruitment?
Okay, who would like to answer that question?
From what I understand, there'd be no prohibition. It'd still be a local option. In my experience, in my conversations with other chiefs, I don't think I've not heard of any that have tried to go back.
Try to go back. So it sounds like it's been mostly a positive experience for the ones that have exited. But to the caller's question, we always can go back into civil service. I think in this case, in order to go back into civil service, we'd have to follow the same process, go back to the ballot, ask the voters to give us permission to go back into civil service. But it doesn't. We would never be out of civil service in perpetuity unless we decided to go back. Let me know if there's any other questions, and we'll certainly jump right over to those questions. So we just established that the civil service process is about 18 months to fill a seat. I want to jump over to the president of the Patrolmen's Union. What are the patrolmen seeing with these vacancies, and what are they feeling? And I'll just say anecdotally what I've been told as a town manager, that all of our officers who've had their careers in the town of Plymouth have never had a July 3rd and a July 4th off because of the pressure, the need for service on those two very busy days. And so, Officer Kreitzer, can you talk about not having a full police department and having a recurring high vacancy rate, what that has done to our police officers?
I can. So this town isn't getting smaller. I think we can all acknowledge that. The call volume is going up, and the officers, the amount of people that are here is either going down or it's staying the same. So the call volume goes up, and the same officers are going to calls more and more. They're getting ordered to work because we have to have officers on the street to keep people safe. It's added stress to people's lives and families, and without adding officers to kind of ease the burden, the strain gets worse and worse, which leads to injuries, shorter careers, fatigued officers. So the numbers, especially in a town that's growing this rapidly, it's incredibly important that these numbers go up. And like we were talking about, it takes a long time to hire and train, whereas someone can resign and it's just like any other job. 2 weeks notice, and there you're off, and now you have 18 months to try to fill that vacancy. And that's a problem that we're running into, is that we can't fill the vacancies and people can leave or quit or do whatever they want immediately. And
those vacancies, as you pointed out, have become a burden on the existing force because they're held over, right? Yeah. And can you talk a little bit of the holdover process? Because so if I'm working in the private sector and I'm a 9 to 5, I'm a banker, right? Mm-hmm. So at 5 o'clock, bank closes, I'm going home. That's not the case with Plymouth Police Department.
Yeah, so every time someone resigns, quits, retires, whatever, that's a signal to all the patrol officers. That's another shift to fill. Mm-hmm. So we work 8-hour shifts right now, so that turns into a 16-hour shift. So between that, you have 8 hours to go home, sleep, maybe eat something, see your family for a few minutes, and back to work. And in the summer, we're running full throttle the whole time, and it gets to you after a while. You're working 60 to 80-hour weeks. You have to make split-second decisions in high-stress situations, and if you have more officers to help and to kind of share the burden, it's a better situation for us. Whereas if we don't, we're just kind of figuring it out on the fly, and it's stressful. And you can see it in the guys, and every time we lose somebody, I can see it. It's just one more shift to fill. And then another guy leaves because now this burden is getting high for them.
Right.
So now they're getting stressed out, and they're like, what am I doing? And then, for whatever reason, they resign. And then that's another shift to fill. And it's almost this snowball effect. And you add that with a increasing population and call volume, and it's a situation that we need to address.
Well, that's a great point. So the town's population isn't getting smaller. It's growing every year. And in fact, what I'm seeing more and more over the past 18 months is the southern part of town is really growing, and which is why you started the program to have a substation down at the Cedarville Fire Station, just because the call volume so much. The police department needs to have a presence down there. And I can say that, Chief and I have talked about future budgets adding to the existing force. So, but we can't have that conversation until we can fill the existing vacancies, right? So as the population continues to grow, we know we need to add more firefighters, we need to add more DPW employees, we need to add more police officers. But until we shrink that vacancy rate, there's no sense in adding more police officers in the budget because we can't fill the existing ones that we have now. And so I think to your point, Kyle, like this is a burden. The policing in 2025 is very different than policing in 2005, right? There's the calls you go on, I think, are very different. Chief, and can you speak? I mean, you've been in the business for many decades. Like the evolution of policing here in town.
Right. So when I started, I came on in 1997. There were hundreds of names on the civil service list,
Right.
hundreds of names, and I was very, very fortunate to be near in the position I was to get selected. But over the years, again, just to piggyback off of Kyle, the population growth has exploded in town. Businesses have exploded. Expectations of the police department. The types of calls that we handle today is never anything we would have considered when I first started. We had people interested in the job. They would stay with the job. They deemed it a career. So it's different now. The times are different. The generation is a little different, if you will. Don't get me wrong. I have a terrific force. The town of Plymouth is very lucky to have the officers that we have. They do a phenomenal job, and I can see some days the exhaustion in their eyes. And we're just trying to alleviate, give them some relief.
They need help.
Yeah.
And so let's talk a little bit about if the voters were to support this question and give the town permission to leave civil service. First point I want to make is I understand both unions have taken a vote and have supported the exit of civil service. Is that fair to say? I don't want to speak.
Correct.
We have.
Okay, so the unions are in full support. The select board is in full support of this. What will be different once we exit civil service? And where I'm going with this is even if we out of civil service and we hire new recruits, we still have to send them through the academy. And we still have that training that Lieutenant Higgins pointed out. But what advantage will we have with trying to get seasoned veterans from other communities to come to Plymouth?
So right now under civil service, in order to get a veteran officer from another community, they have to come from another civil service department. But prior to them allowing to be transferred, say an officer from Wareham wants to transfer here, I have to be willing to sign that I will accept that officer, but more importantly, the other chief, his current chief, will have to sign approval of his transfer. And what we're finding now, other departments are having the same problems as we are, is that many chiefs are reluctant to let that employee go. If we get out of civil service, it will open up our pool of potential veteran and experienced officers to come to Plymouth, including those from non-civil service agencies, and even colleges and universities. College and university police officers, they're trained to the same standards we are. They're post-certified, and in some instances, like the big college, city colleges, they have more experience than even Plymouth police officers.
Sure.
They see the same things on a day-to-day basis that we do. So so being able to get the veteran officers transfer, number one, we can get them on the road quicker. We don't have the lag time or the waste of funding. Well, not really a waste of funding, but we don't have to spend additional funding while they're in the academy and really getting nothing in return.
And so if we were to do that, right, so we're going to establish our own recruiting processes, right? So civil service, so if I'm pro-civil service and I'm against this question, one of my arguments would be, well, civil service, some of the advantages are they allow preferences for residents, they allow preferences for veterans, they allow preferences for minorities or folks that have a second language. What are we doing to ensure that we have those same preferences?
So that's addressed in the MOA, draft MOA we have with the unions. We will still be able to have those opportunities. Right now, to take the Massachusetts Civil Service exam, you need either a high school diploma or GED and a Massachusetts driver's license. That's it. We will be able to, and when the list is established, when we get the list is the list. We cannot change that list in any way. In the demographics of the candidates, those are the demographics. We will be able to recruit people that we deem is more suitable or more representative of our town. We will be able to establish an exam if we choose to do so that can increase the minimum requirements, perhaps an associate's degree
This is a minimum requirement.
as a minimum requirement right now. We can still include all of those preferences if we wish, and we can have the residency, we can have the military preference at added points. We can add for language, language ability, EMTs. We can have the same thing.
EMTs.
So there will be no change. And
So what I'm hearing, Chief, is that by exiting civil service, we can develop a framework that specifically meets, one, the service needs of our community,
Right.
And what we're seeking to find out of police officers based upon what we're hearing on a regular basis, what we're seeing on a regular basis in our community, versus what I heard you say is, once they take the civil service exam, we can't alter it. We get the exam, we get the list, we got to start from the top and work our way down.
Correct.
Right? Is that fair to say?
Correct.
So, so to me, maybe, those are some of the things that our voters should think about when they're going to the ballot and casting their vote. What else should be considered for an advantage or a disadvantage for this question?
I think an advantage, again, it will give us more flexibility. We will have more control over who we hire for police officers for the town of Plymouth. As I said, times have changed. Our demographics have changed. The expectations of our officers have changed. So we could recruit. We could focus our attention on those individuals or local colleges, if you will, to come work for us. We could go out and recruit right now. Say we went to Quincy College or any other college. Hey, take the civil service test. We don't know where these students are from, so they take the civil service test, be for their own community, but not for the town of Plymouth.
Right.
But we will be able to actively find the square peg for the square hole.
Well, and I just want to point out that, because it was a question that was asked, that exiting civil service is only for the police department. We're not talking about the fire department or any other department. This is strictly for the police department. Right. So, at some point in the future, if the fire union came forward and said that they wanted to work with us in the same vein, we'd be happy to work with them. But our focus right now is working with the police department. We have a challenge, and we're trying to solve the problems that we have faced over the last 4 to 5 years with these vacancies.
Right.
Do we have any other questions? I know we're at a 30-minute mark. Do we have any other questions?
We do. So the first question was, breaking the 18-month period down, how much time would actually be saved by exiting civil service? Another question we also had was, first off, thank you all for your service. Has the chief heard from other chiefs who have opted out of civil service that they noticed an impact to ease of hiring? It will take time for these towns to gauge numbers, but there was a noticeable difference after a year. Excuse me, I'm just trying to read this. After a year or so. Yes, there was a noticeable difference after a year or so.
Okay.
So let's start with the second one first. So the second question was, have you communicated with other chiefs
Right.
Who have exited civil service, and did they see a noticeable difference?
Yeah, they have. So, for example, I spoke to a chief yesterday. A couple of same situations. He had officers resign, and he had the replacements within 2 weeks to fill their positions. Whereas we have, like I said, we had the officer put in his notice 2 days ago. He'll be gone in 2 weeks. Current process is going to take an extended period of time to fill. We talk about the 18 months. So the civil service, their last exam was held last month in March. The results won't come out till July. Then what happens is we have to deal with now another state agency, the MPTC, Mass Police Training Council, one of their academies. So their academy dates are not always fixed. They may pop up, they may be delayed for a certain period of time. So part of the process is we always want to have people ready to get into those vacant seats because there's such a need or such a backlog demand for those seats. So what happens when we hire today? Once the civil service list is signed by the candidate, we give them the application packet. They turn the packet in. They go through an extensive background check that can take weeks. If they pass all of that, then we give them a recorded interview. I send my recommendations to you. You approve or deny. Then after that, they have to have a medical exam, psychological exam. Then they go back to civil service at HRD for a physical ability exam. And only once all of that process is completed, then I can submit their names for a seat at the academy. Some time ago,
that delay,
Yeah.
you may miss that window.
may miss that window.
Yep.
And this is, I believe this is what happened last year. We missed it by a couple of weeks. And by no fault to anybody's, but it's just, we rely on the medical doctors to have appointments ready. The psychiatrists have appointments ready. So it's hit or miss.
And so the question, when you had talked to the other chiefs who have come out of civil service, their response was that they were able to shorten that window.
So shorten that window. They weren't so reliant on the civil service list to be certified and ready for them, that they already had a list of potential candidates ready to go.
And I think that bleeds into the first question that came up was how much time will be saved. And I think based upon what I heard Chief, both you and Lieutenant mention, as far as time that will be saved, I think it depends, right? So if you're taking on a veteran police officer that's lateral transfer from a different department, Lieutenant, how many? You said what's their training period? 4 weeks, right?
Yeah, about a month. I mean,
So-
if we have someone that transfers far away, they might need to learn the town a little bit more, but usually it's a town over, 2 towns over, so they're already familiar or already reside in Plymouth.
Sure.
So it's just a quick.
So for a veteran transfer, to answer the question, so a veteran lateral transfer, you're going from an 18-month process down to a 4-week process, right?
Absolutely.
And then it sounds like, Chief, if this is a new recruit, how much time would you save on a new recruit from the civil service process to the non-civil service process?
I mean, we would always have an available rotating or available list to choose from. We would know when the academies are scheduled for,
Yep.
and we'd be able to plan ahead. We would
Right.
be able to schedule
Makes
those
sense.
medical appointments well ahead of time instead of scrambling.
So you could have like a rolling list, right? So you get this rolling list of, hey, listen, I live in town. I was born and raised in this community. I want to be a police officer. You do go through that vetting process.
Right.
They're still going to do the psych exams. They're still going
All
to do the
that.
physical exams. But then now you have a list waiting for when that call comes from MPTC. Hey, listen, we're going to put on a class. And you say, I got 5 guys, I'm going to sign them up right away, right? So, I mean, so that alone, you could probably save like maybe 4 or 5 months there, right?
That's the hope.
Okay.
We could pre-schedule once we know the academy dates. We could pre-schedule appointments with the medical professionals. So, yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
There is. What would be the cost to the town to perform the preliminary testing and sorting requirements to obtain new recruits? Someone has to perform this procedure at what costs?
Do you want to talk?
Can you do that?
Yeah. Go ahead. Go repeat that question one
Sure.
more time.
What would be the cost to the town to perform the preliminary testing and sorting requirements to obtain new recruits? Someone has to perform this procedure at what costs?
The cost to do, I think, all the exams.
Right.
you're
So
referring to.
there are a number of vendors available that do. One of the most popular ones now is called Get Badged. There's also a couple. I'm not throwing their name out there, but Hand in Hand Consulting does one as well. And the cost varies. Some departments join a subscription, if you will, to these vendors, or they share a cost with the test takers or the applicant in the town. There will be a nominal cost, but again, it's well worth getting viable and great candidates for our community.
Well, and I think the other thing too we haven't mentioned is that, especially fire and police, because of civil service, you guys go through your own civil service process. the own vetting process with, like you said, psych exams, physical fitness exams, things of that nature. But we have a human resources department that is doing the same for all of our other departments, right? So if you're a DPW employee, they're non-civil service, you would go to the human resource department, you would apply, you would be interviewed, you would be selected based upon your qualifications for that specific position. You would be sent to a local outpatient clinic for your physical fitness exam. So we already have a lot of these processes in place. Just because of civil service, fire and police have been disconnected to what human resources department is already doing for the rest of the 300 employees.
Right. All the costs associated right now with all those medical, psychological exams are our responsibility.
Our costs.
Our
right.
costs.
Right.
The only thing right now that's not our responsibility is the actual taking of the exam. That's on the candidate.
They pay for that.
They pay for
through
that.
civil service.
Right.
Right.
And they also pay for their own academies. Right now is $2,500, I think.
Yeah, I think between 25 and 3.
Yeah, $2,500 to $3,000 is what they pay right now to
go to the academy.
go to the academy, and
Right,
that's
and they
their
pay
that's
for
their
the civil
cost.
service exam.
Yes.
Right.
Can I comment on the costs?
Sure.
So the costs also, we have to think about what are the costs right now with having vacancies. So we're paying people to go to the academy. They're employees. They're making money. We're paying officers to train them. In the meantime, we're paying overtime in order to fill those vacancies. And then what has happened is people don't last long. So you're paying these people 18, not 18 months, but you're paying them for 22, 21 weeks to go to an academy. Then they go through training, and then they decide it isn't for them, and then they're gone, and that money is just gone. And with leaving civil service, it gives us the opportunity to recruit we can go to job fairs, we can go to college campuses, we can go get high quality candidates rather than wait for the ones to come to us and just hope that they check Plymouth on the box when they're taking this test. So yeah, while the test taking the burden would then shift to us to pay for, it could save a lot of money long term if we're able to hire candidates that last a career here,
And from what I've been told, Officer Kreitzer, is that the unions are committed to helping with that recruitment process as well. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm excited to do that because we're able to kind of have a hand in getting candidates that are more qualified, and we can go try to seek people who have a higher standard than just like maybe I'll give this police thing a try. People who want to do this job.
And like you said, go to a job fair at Bridgewater State University.
Correct, yeah.
Go there, have a table, talk to students, see
Military
if they're
job
interested.
fairs, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Versus the civil service process, as we've talked about for the last 30 plus minutes, we get a list. No qualifications necessary. If you're at the top of the list, you're going to get the first phone call.
Yeah,
right?
it's a test on a Wednesday at 8 a.m. in Boston. So some people probably don't make it. Some people aren't excited to make it. And that's just the system that we're given right now. And, that's why we have these vacancies.
Exactly. Any other questions?
We do. Are we not going to continue the precise testing, physical, psychological, and background investigations? So again, civil service performs the initial testing and sorting of applicants.
So they don't. They don't. They give us a list based upon the scores.
Yeah, they give us a list that's depend on scores. It's just a generalized multiple choice exam. You score the highest, you're number one on the list. Everything else, our hiring standards are not going to change. We still will go through the rigorous medical, psychological exam. They are, in addition to once they're accepted in the academy, they have to go through another physical ability test, the Cooper test, to get in. So none of those qualifications and none of those standards are going to change.
And I think that's why I think people really don't understand civil service. They administer the exam, and if you score the highest on the exam, you go to the top of the list. They're not asking you questions about your physical aptitude or your mental capacity. That is all vetted through the process that happens after we get the list, right? And that's going to continue. I think what you said, Chief, that process is going to continue with or without civil service because we need to have that standard.
Well, and not only that, it's a requirement of the Post Commission, Police Officer Standards and Training Commission. before the officer can even get their certification number, we have to show that these standards were met, that they did pass the medical, they did pass the psychological, they did pass the physical ability test. So it's not only just our standards, which I would never lessen, it's requirement of post.
And not to go too far down the post rabbit hole, but can you just explain to folks? So post is a commission that was created about 4 or 5 years ago now. It's really, to how I understand, this commission holds police officers to an extremely high standard. So, for example, if there was discipline imposed on a police officer, it would have to be sent to Post, and Post actually submits that on their website for the public to view, correct? I mean, that's just one example
Yeah,
of
so-
the
so-
standards Post holds us to.
Yeah, so POST is the certification commission for the state for all police officers. And it's true. Not all levels of discipline or officer complaints need to be reported to POST. They do have a criteria you need to meet. But those that are sent to POST, they are reviewed, they are vetted. And if they do meet a certain, even a higher level of criteria, they will post those results of the findings on their website.
And so it's that level of scrutiny that the Post Commission has now imposed on police officers, which, we've had these conversations during collective bargaining. I mean, police officers who signed up even 6-7 years ago, there was no Post Commission, and now all police officers are subject to these new standards, and they're rigorous, and it's really there to hold police officers accountable for their actions. So, which is good. I mean, it's good for all of us. Any other questions?
Not currently, no.
Okay.
Yeah, so POST, we're getting ready to do our very first recertification of the first portion of officers that were initially certified 3 years ago. So the emails going back and forth already, just showing verifications of certain standards have been met, training standards, disciplinary issues and whatnot, that I have to sign an affidavit confirming that each officer has completed their training, is not under any type of investigation or has any ongoing disciplinary issues. So,
And that's done annually or every 2 years?
every 3 years.
Every 3 years.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, so we're nearing the end. It doesn't sound like we have any more questions. Oh, we
Question
do.
just came in.
Okay.
Or more of a statement. So the test creates a list to choose from. Then the police officials can then sort through the list for the best candidate for the position.
No.
Not right now.
Not
So,
right now.
so in order to, once we get the civil service list, and we start the vetting process, if we have a candidate that we don't think is suitable, there's something in their background or whatever we may find during the interview process, we can ask them to voluntarily withdraw from the process. A majority of them, once you do speak to the issues, they do voluntarily withdraw. Those who do not wish to withdraw, now we have to go through a lengthy and costly bypass process that the rules are established by civil service. And it can be time consuming, it can be costly because the attorneys now get involved. There's a hearing, it could be months or even a year or so later. And even in the end, civil service ensures that their process was followed. And if there's any deviation from a process, they can order that person to be hired regardless, even though your background or whatever other investigation you've done shows it will not be a good fit. And that can be problematic.
Okay. That's good to know. Any other questions?
Not currently, no.
No other questions. So I think we covered a lot this morning. We'll hang in for another minute or so if there's more questions, folks. If you're at home typing away, we'll give you another minute to finish your question before we break. But I do think we've covered a lot on what civil service is and what it isn't. But I think more importantly, this is really focused on recruiting high quality individuals who want to come work here, and then retaining them so they don't become lateral transfers and we don't become a training ground for other municipalities in the South Shore. So May 17th is the election. We have 5 polling locations at our May 17th local election. In the past, we had 14 polling locations, and we've consolidate it down to 5. So for those that are at home, make sure you know where your polling location is this year because it may have changed. And we will turn it back to the voters to decide whether or not the Plymouth Police Department should exit civil service. So I thank you all for coming. One last check. Any other questions? No other questions. So again, thank you all for coming. We'll replay this episode throughout the coming weeks as we lead up to the May 17th local election. So thank you all for joining us this morning. And if you have any other questions, we're going to post this video on the town's website. We're working on a frequently asked questionnaire so that we can post that as well. And certainly reach out to myself or the chief or any one of the union members here, and we're happy to answer those questions so you become a more informed voter on May 17th. So thank you, and have a great long weekend.